Anyway, hello everybody. I'm sorry about this. Yes, we tried it earlier and it worked fine. So yes, this is always the way anyway. But yeah, first of all, just to introduce myself, I am Sarah Wheatley. I'm a mother of two and a psychotherapist who supports women and babies in the perinatal period. I have been on BBC Radio 4 Woman's Hour talking about perinatal anxiety, and I've got a special interest in what helps women stay emotionally healthy during the transition into motherhood, which is part of the reason why I got to meet Annie in the first place. I'm just going to see how Annie is getting on. 2 seconds. Hello, Annie. Hello, how are you doing? Okay. Thank you. It keeps on coming through as a phone call. Okay. Right. Okay. Right, I'm going to try inviting you this way. Shall I try that? Have you got anything that's happened there? Whilst we're waiting, it'd be really helpful if anybody's got any questions they specifically wanted to ask Annie, if you could type them in the chat box, then we will try and make sure that we answer them either during the talk or at the end if there is something that's really particularly on your mind. I know that can be a bit daunting, sort of being asked to answer a question right at the beginning. If it only does it as a phone call, maybe we'll just do it as a chat rather than as video, because that might be easier. Oh,
I think.
well, hey, I think we could be there.
Is that good?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. Oh.
Brilliant.
Okay.
Yay! Hello. Can everyone see Annie?
Can you see me okay?
Anyway, hello. Thank you, Annie. I'm so sorry that that's taken so much time. But yeah, everyone can see you now, so that's great.
We're here.
Okay. We're good. We're here. Wonderful. Yes. Anyway, so yes, Annie, sorry to sort of launch you in after all of that. But yeah, I was wondering if you could just introduce a little bit about yourself.
Yes, amazing. So hopefully everyone can hear me. Just send a message if you can't. So I'm Annie Breen. I live in Edinburgh. I'm a nutritional therapist and I'm a mum of Bonnie. She's nearly 3. I got into nutritional therapy in 2012 after spending about 10 years in the support kind of sector. So I was working in domestic violence, family support, child protection, which I loved. But I always felt there was something missing and that was something else I should be doing. So I was helping people change their external environment, but it kind of came to my attention that the internal environment, that their health on a deeper level just wasn't great. So that kind of led me, and personal issues with health as well and with my family, led me down a path into nutrition really. And never looked back since. And then I had Bonnie, and that changed everything again. So now I'm working with mums.
Okay. Well, so just to explain, I asked Annie to do this session because I'm a counsellor who supports women pre and postnatally, but I'm aware that what I can offer is only one part of the picture. So there's a whole raft of things that women can do to look after their mental and physical well-being at this stage. And obviously a really good one to talk about is nutrition, because as a mum, especially when you've got a newborn, this can be one of the hardest things to think about, but also we all need to eat. So actually it's one of the things that we can all incorporate bits of. And I'm really aware that when I started this talk, I wanted to make it short and sweet, because I'm aware there might be quite a lot of mums on, and it's quite sort of an ask to sort of stay on for a while. So the more I've talked to you about this, though, the more I've realised that sort of this is going to be quite short for what you actually need to cover. So I just want to explain that Annie has agreed to try and keep her talk to 25 minutes, which is just a whistle-stop tour of matrescence, the gut-brain axis, and postnatal depletion. But we might have to skim over some bits. And if there is anything you're curious about, I'm going to send an email at the end with all Annie's contact details and resources that she would sort of link you to and all the rest of it, so that you can get in touch with her if necessary, and maybe discuss some of those things with her later. We'll finish the talk at about half an hour, so that sort of people that need to leave can leave, but there will be a time for some questions at the end if you're able to stay for those as well. Anyway, so moving on. So hello again, Annie. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this. It's quite a lot for topics, but how did you get interested in all of this in the first place?
Yeah, so I think a lot of us that work in health have some kind of personal story, and for me it was very much my postpartum experience after having Bonnie, where I felt that I just was not at all prepared, opposed to the lead up with the pregnancy and everything. I thought I was really prepared, and that went quite well, and the birth went well, and it was all really, really good. And then all of a sudden this reality hit me. I was completely overwhelmed, I was exhausted, I felt completely lost with who I was, and my emotional health just took a real kind of dive downhill. And I felt very guilty, because I felt like I shouldn't be feeling this way, because I'm so lucky to have this gorgeous little Bonnie, and I wanted to show up for her and be the best I could, and have the energy to just be a mum, really. And it turned out to be very, very different, and I just felt this overwhelm, which I've not used that word as much as I have in the last couple of years, took over. So cutting a longish story short, when I started, I hit rock bottom, where I just felt that I couldn't go on anymore, and Dan and Bonnie would be better off without me, which any mum will sort of know that is a really lowest of the low way to feel. So we went and we got some help, and I spoke to the GP, and I sourced other means of help. This really started this incredible journey back to me, which started with just creating space for myself to try and figure out what I needed to do and get down under some of these layers. I was told that I had postnatal depression, and told these different kind of diagnoses and labels, but it made sense, and it was a relief, but I just felt like it didn't really encompass how I was feeling inside. So then I went down this kind of self-discovery journey of just digging a little bit deeper, which led me to kind of bring back some of the things I'd learned in nutrition world. Like for a while I felt like an imposter, because I should know all this stuff and I should do well, and I was feeling terrible. But I got myself to a point where I could start to bring some of those things back, and I started looking at the gut and inflammation and sleep and my immune health and all these different factors, which I'll talk a bit about, and slowly started to piece the puzzles back together of my identity, really, and who I was and what I needed to do to feel well and have the energy to show up as a happy, healthy mum. So after that, because I found out so much interesting stuff, and I just was so kind of bought into it, and it really helped me. I then went on to develop my program to help other mums, which is a really kind of, I don't have an elevator pitch, like the building would have to be really high. What I do in nutritional therapy is way beyond just food, but essentially it is looking at the root cause and taking a person as an individual and looking at what's going on underneath the surface, and not just taking the symptoms.
Okay. So, well, when we were talking earlier, one of the things that I was thinking about was matrescence, and I find that a really useful, I suppose, a really useful framework for sort of pinning some of the sort of common themes of motherhood on. And I was wondering if you could explain a wee bit about that.
Yeah, so I couldn't say this word last year. I went to a talk, I went to meet Dr. Oscar Sarah who is the author of the Postnatal Depletion Cure. And he is the person that introduced me to this concept, matrescence. It's actually an anthropological term from the 70s. Dana Raphael, she also coined the term doula. She's a medical anthropologist, and she coined this. And I think what kind of happened was it just got lost into history until very recently, where people like reproductive psychiatrist Alexandra Sachs is bringing it back into the forth, but also applying it into modern motherhood. And matrescence, like adolescence, is the term for describing the process of becoming a mother. And if we think about adolescence, and this really did get me thinking about my adolescence, that was a bit of a crazy time. I was quite lost. I didn't know who I was, quite fearful of the future. In fact, a lot of the emotions that came up when I became a mum. So it was really interesting. But that period of time is a good decade. And they say for mums, it's an even more significant shift. It's a psychological, it's a physical, but hormonal and identity shift as well. But we give birth and suddenly our hormones drop overnight, so even more so than adolescence. And for each mum, this journey, this transition is different, and for each child you have your own matrescence. So there's 4 key areas that when I dug a little bit deeper into the research, just made so much sense to me, and all those feelings that I was feeling with the depression and feeling quite overwhelmed and lost in my identity, this really was comforting. So 4 of the key areas. The first one is the dynamics, the change in dynamics. And I don't know, from the support I went through, the antenatal classes, we didn't really talk about this. We talked about more medical stuff and reducing risk and that sort of thing, but we didn't talk about the more psychological aspect. So the change in dynamics, literally when 2 become 3 or 3 become 4, this can form new connections, intimate connections. Yeah, exactly. And it's lovely and it's intimate and you're sharing all this loveliness, but it also brings about new pressures. People say, oh, get sleep while you can. I actually think you should test your relationship with no sleep. Like, how are you going to be when you're under those sort of physiological pressures of not having sleep and then having all these different demands? So it's looking at the dynamics, and for me this is just acknowledging it. So when I work with mums, it's just having that conversation. It's not to put pressure or fear or dampen down this whole lovely time. It's just this realistic kind of conversation, but also the dynamics of how you were raised as well. I think a lot of the time we relive our childhood through our parenthood. So we've had trauma or bad experiences early on. Sometimes, we've got this thing in our head, I want to do things differently, I want to make things different, but we're actually reliving that, and that can impact how we show up as a parent. So I think that's really important to know. And then there's the fantasy versus reality, where we seem to be in the midst of this kind of super mum culture, where mums are having babies, they're going to work, they're keeping the house going. We're bombarded with technology and information, we're just on all the time. And I think a lot of people don't share their struggles. We keep them to ourselves. So this picture that's being painted is quite false, because everyone has their own kind of challenges and struggles. And then we base our kind of fancy of what motherhood's going to be like on what we see around us in our community and culture. And then when it's different, that can be quite a disappointment. And then there's the biggest one for me is the ambivalence, the push and pull. And when I heard Dr. Alexandra Sachs talk about this, I was just like, wow, because we are constantly being pulled, you know, we want to be close to our child, we crave that, but we crave our space, physical and emotional at the same time. And we're bombarded by decisions, hard decisions all the time, where sometimes we actually have to put ourselves first. And then that goes on to mother guilt. And I think there's a huge difference between guilt and shame. But over time, when we're feeling guilty all the time, we actually start to attach, you know, we feel like we're a bad mum or a bad person, and that's shame. And I think then what can happen is we don't want to talk about that because it feels bad and wrong, and we keep it to ourselves for fear of being judged. And this is what certainly happened to me, that I found myself trapped between who I was before I became a mum and then who I am as a mum. My identity, I was really lost and fearful of talking about it because I couldn't articulate how I was feeling, because I didn't know all about this then. I just thought, you know, there's this grey area of matrescence, which is a beautiful, colourful area. It's not grey, but if you haven't got postnatal depression and you're not like killing it as a mum, this kind of conversation wasn't happening because it's not medical. It's a rite of passage. It's spiritual. It's all of these things. And, you know, modern medicine, we are kind of going towards treating disease, and motherhood isn't a disease. It is a huge psychological transition. So I think for me, I'm really passionate about bringing that conversation to the fore. So that's matrescence.
Thank you. Yeah, even that itself is just a really helpful framework, definitely. Sorry, interrupted you, but
oh, you're fine.
And yeah, I think again I can relate to so many different parts of that. Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of people that I see, so many of those different things I would say come into play, and that sort of massive psychological shift. And I really like how you say that sort of become a mother is not a sort of medical condition. It's not, but yeah, a bit like adolescence. It's a big transition. It takes a lot of support and time. And
you know, it's not, but I think when these things are left unnurtured, unnourished, and with the postnatal depletion, that can lead to medical symptoms, that can lead to medical diagnosis, when actually when you dig a little bit deeper, that person is just really struggling with the discomfort of this transition because they didn't know about it, and this huge identity kind of shift and crisis.
Okay, so you mentioned postnatal depletion. Can you tell us a bit more about that, please?
Absolutely. So it was coined by Dr. Oscar Serralak. He's written a book, The Postnatal Depletion Cure. I really recommend buy it. He was seeing women, and actually it started with his wife, who's a doctor but also a functional medicine practitioner, coming into his clinic, who were just completely burnt out, and again presenting as depressed, anxious, with like this mental health presentation, but they didn't fit the criteria of a medical diagnosis. So again, he kind of did his research, and he looked into matrescence, and then he looked into this depletion that happens, and basically it's the robbery of nutrients that we give to grow a little human and live a little human. I like to call it the gift of nutrients rather than robbery, because you know we're doing it consciously, and the placenta is really magical in making sure the baby gets everything it needs to grow and be healthy. So that can sometimes be at the expense of the mum, especially if you think how a lot of us go into motherhood already depleted. You know, we're already quite busy, we're quite stressed, we're working, and our diets, the Western diet generally isn't that high quality, so we're actually nutrient deficient anyway. So if we're giving the baby all of this, they're quite depleted. We're going to be even more depleted when we give birth. And then what tends to happen is there's quite a lot of focus on the baby after birth and making sure the baby's needs are met. And the mum, we have loads of blood tests and things leading up to the birth, but then we're just kind of, right, on you go, you know. So what we need is we need to replenish, and we need to re-nourish and put the nutrients back. And things like iron that we need for energy, zinc for our immune system, vitamin B12 for our nervous system. Now, when I talk about food, food is medicine, food is primary medicine, it is information. So the nutrients that we have in our food actually activate certain metabolic processes in the body, or all metabolic processes in the body. We rely on it, so that's why we call it information in sort of the functional medicine world. So if we're not giving ourselves the nutrients we need to make brain chemicals, neurotransmitters, to make energy, then we're really going to struggle with all those things and all the things we need in that postpartum, that fourth trimester. There's a huge psychological aspect to it as well, and in his book he talks about all the emotions that come up, which really do kind of complement the Matrescence framework as well. But ultimately it's looking at the nutrients, so it's the micronutrients and the macronutrients, so your proteins, carbs, and fats, and then all the vitamins and minerals that we get in food.
Okay. And this is the bit where I start getting a bit hazy, because I know so little about it. And I mean, not that I'm sure that you can sort of do a one size fits all, but if somebody came to you when they were pregnant and or after giving birth and you suspected they had postnatal depletion, what would you what would you do? What would you suggest?
So I love to rely on food, and I love to use it as sort of a primary medicine. But a lot of the time I'm finding that mums are needing supplements short term, just to bolster that nutrient level and rebalance the body. So food, you want to have as colourful diet as possible, lots of fruit and veg, really good quality protein and fat, because especially if we're breastfeeding, we're giving even more away. And you know, the brain shrinks in the third trimester. The brain is made of fat, so we need our omega-3 fatty acids to really help with cognition and our cellular health. So really good quality proteins and fats, lots of colour. And I absolutely love bone broth for healing, especially if you've had a C-section, like it heals the connective tissue. And that's quite easy to make in a slow cooker. And there's vegetarian options with algae as well. Lots of whole foods, lots of organic food. And then with supplements, I tend to, that's personal, so I'll go on like case by case, but omega-3s and a really good multivitamin with methylated forms. So quite a lot of the vitamins we buy on the high street are they're synthetic, so they're not active. So the body has to work hard to convert them, and some people can't. That's a genetic issue. So a good quality multivitamin.
Got you back. Okay, I think we missed a bit about sort of the difference between good quality multivitamins and synthetic or more synthetic multivitamins. Okay, sorry, you just froze for a minute. Okay. So I'm aware that I might have taken you sort of slightly off topic, but where does the gut-brain axis sort of fit into this? Sorry, I'm moving things on, but yeah, I'm wondering where that fits in with.
So it has to be absorbed. So we can have the best diet in the world, we can take the best supplements in the world, but if our gut isn't working well, if it's not pulling those nutrients from the food and putting it in the cells, we're not utilizing that. So the gut has trillions of bacteria in it, and we call it the microbiome. And actually what they do is they help the digestion of our food, but they also produce vitamins, especially ones for mental health. They produce B vitamins, which is really, really important. And in the gut also, there is more serotonin produced. There's 400 times more serotonin produced in the gut than in the brain. So
Wow.
if we are inflamed, and inflammation can be caused from food intolerances, from medications, from stress. Stress is the biggest one. When we go into fight or flight and survival mode, essentially what we're doing is we're activating all the parts of the body we need to run away from a tiger. And we don't need to eat a burger, and we don't need to make a baby. So reproduction and digestion shuts down. So when we need sugar to make ourselves run away. If we haven't got enough in the system, we start to burn muscle. We break the muscle down. And the lining of the gut is essentially muscle. So then what happens is, over time, stress, food intolerance, medication, if we imbalance our bugs and make them unhappy, this gut lining, the tight junctions come apart. And then what happens is particles, foreign invaders, go through, and the immune system sees them as foreign invaders, so they attack them. And then you've got this inflammatory cascade, and inflammation kind of perpetuates inflammation. And this can affect our hormonal health, our cognition, all sorts of things, brain fog. And what joins the gut and the brain is this big cable. It's like an internet cable, and it goes from, it's the vagus nerve, and it goes from the adrenal glands, which are responsible for our stress hormones and sex hormones. They sit on our kidneys, and it goes all the way up to the amygdala, which is the fear center in the brain, but it's wrapped around our gut. And actually, if you cut the vagus nerve, the nervous system between the gut and the brain would still function, the enteric nervous system. So really we need to be, and in functional medicine world and current research, we're seeing this more as one organ, the gut and the brain, because they are literally connected. And there's more neurons in the gut than there is in the spine. And there's more neurotransmitters produced along the enteric nervous system as well. Now, the big thing for me, and I know we're running out of time, but the most interesting thing recently in a research paper is the communication from the gut to the brain. The afferent communication is 90%. So there is more signals being sent that way, which, you know, so in brief, I did a gut test. I was inflamed. I did have imbalances in my gut. And for me, it was a huge piece of the puzzle. Because I could actually see this science, like, oh my goodness, no wonder I'm probably not absorbing my nutrients, I'm not sleeping, so I'm stressed, the gut lining's probably leaky, and it's going around the central blood system and possibly going into the blood-brain barrier, and lots of things can pass that because it's a similar kind of lining as the gut. But that is a real whistle-top story. Thank you.
Yeah. I was just thinking about how sometimes when kids are anxious, they feel that they say they've got a sore tummy. So it literally could be that actually they are feeling their anxiety in their tummy. It is in their gut. And also when people talk about gut feelings and all the rest of it, that there's already this sort of folk wisdom that actually our guts and our brains are very, very connected, or our guts and emotions are very, very connected. And you're saying that now the science is backing it up.
Yeah, and as mums, I help mums, you know, reconnect with their intuition, with what's in their heart and what's in their gut. And I think sometimes when we go through this identity shift, we lose that kind of connection with what's true to us. And if we've actually got a physiological imbalance and inflammation, that actual communication isn't working so well. So we don't trust our gut. And that's what I found. I lost faith in my gut because nothing was in congruence with each other. And so it's so interesting. But there's so much you can do, you know, through diet and lifestyle to support it.
Yeah. I was thinking about the vagus nerve and sort of like open water swimming is a big thing down in Portobello, and there's been a lot of people talking about cold water and again the impact of that on the parasympathetic nervous system as well.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm aware that so much more that I could ask you to talk about, and that has been really thought-provoking. If any of you want to ask questions, we're going to stay on for another 10 minutes and or a little bit longer than that. And I'm aware that some people might have to leave because we're at time, but if you'd like to ask any questions, if you put them in the chat box, then Annie can answer them. Or try to answer them. Sorry, I'm just sort of making that up. But
no, that's fine.
Yeah, and
that's fine. And
and I'll be sending out a copy of this recording later on for people that do have to go. So you could even leave a question and we'll answer it, and you'll see that later on. And as I say, I will be sending on Annie's details and her resource list, and also different ways that you can get in touch with her if you've got any questions later on. Okay. Anyway, I was wondering what I was going to say this. I mean, I know that sort of these are things that I've been thinking about, and possibly a lot of the people sort of that have come online have been thinking about, but I was wondering sort of what kind of response you get from a lot of mums when you explain to them that actually how they're feeling could be a lot to do with what they're eating.
Yeah. So I found that there is this kind of walking on eggshells kind of feeling where you don't want to upset a mum, and me included, like, you know, with and I think sometimes you can see what's going on from the outside, can't you, especially if it's someone you're close to. And I know, because I've been there, that when you're feeling really crappy and low of energy and just not good, you're going to reach for the things that are going to give you that sudden burst of energy. So whether that's sugar, but also the bugs in our gut, the pathogenic bugs thrive off sugar and sweet and refined carbs. So they will be sending signals up that vagus nerve to say, feed me, so they can grow. Because we've never coexisted without them, so they need to survive. I try to get people to approach me, or I think it's really important to kind of spread this information just through this, you know, talking to you today and doing talks. It's not about blame, and you know, it's not about, oh, you've been doing it all wrong, and it's about, once you've got that information, it's empowering, like it's tools, and it's not stuff that's kind of out there in the mainstream. It's getting better, but you know, this whole lifestyle medicine and being your own health agent and taking back your health, this is all, there's a real movement happening right now. And I think also it doesn't have to be dramatic changes, it can be small changes, and it needs to be enjoyable, because food is joy, like food is what connects us. It should be fun. And I think another thing that really kind of helps me is just thinking how I want to model my behavior to body, that I want her to be healthy and well, and I want her to eat a diverse diet, and I want her to enjoy food, and I want her to see it as, yeah, exactly, joy and connection and all the other things that it is, as well as medicine. So I try and keep that in my mind, especially when she's throwing something across the floor. And but yeah, so it's not about blame, and it's not about, you know, feeling guilty if you haven't been doing that. It's just being really open to new stuff and trying something different.
No, that's a really good way of looking at it, and how you can gently introduce that, definitely.
Yeah.
I've noticed there's a question on the chat. Somebody's saying, amazing how much the brain shrinks during the third trimester. Is that why mums get so-called baby brain? I was going to say, I've got my thoughts on that. I don't know if you've got a response to that, but
yeah. So actually, it's not the size that counts. It's more the function. And I've actually read a bit of research on this, and it's almost like a trade-off. That happens for evolutionary. We are programmed to focus on our baby because we're there to keep that baby safe. We're not supposed to be thinking about going back to work, doing the shopping. You know, evolutionary, we mothered in tribes, and it was very different to our 21st century. So I think now it annoys us because we can't remember where we parked our car, or we put the remote control in the fridge. But we're not really supposed to be worrying about those things. So if we can just understand it from a kind of trade-off, that it's a lovely thing, it's a natural thing, and that we need to look at creating space that we can focus on that baby, but not neglecting yourself. It's still putting your own needs first. But I think we just have to remember too much in this day and age. But also when we talk about baby brain dysbiosis in the gut causes brain fog. Blood sugar imbalance causes brain fog. And nutrient depletion causes brain fog because we haven't got the nutrients to make the brain function the way it should. So sometimes mothers suffer more than what they should because their diet or lifestyle isn't maybe as healthy as what it could be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Well, I think mine were very similar to what you said about the narrowing of focus, and now we know that sort of women's brains are flooded with hormones that make them more anxious from conception till their baby's about 2 years old. And one of the theories behind that is that actually it is because from an evolutionary perspective, we're, as you say, narrowing our focus onto threats in our baby's environment. Our priority becomes keeping this baby safe, sort of from as soon as we know that we're pregnant or we become pregnant. And so actually, we develop this sort of very, very sort of acute sort of sense of sort of hyper arousal almost, that means that, but unfortunately we don't have bears and wolves and things like that. We sort of have work stress and we have other things like that. So it can be that is why these things become so stressful, because actually they become threats in our environment, actually the things that are stressing us out. And likewise, sort of when our baby's born, if we're told that there are certain ways to be with our baby or get our baby to behave, and we can't do that, then again it can feel like a threatening thing, or something's going wrong, or we're scared, we're worried about sort of this potential threat to our baby, and so it can be very anxiety producing.